Hey everybody, welcome to the Elseworlds Exchange. I'm Sal, and I'm joined today by Jim Zub. Jim, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks, man. Thanks for having me again. I really appreciate
It's always our pleasure. I love your show on your YouTube channel where you actually
it.
get, and I don't know. I'm like, every time I watch an episode, I'm like, we could have done that. Oh,
My YouTube channel is very small, just
oh
to
yeah,
clarify here. Yeah, I'd only started, like, I've had it for a while, but it's one of those things where I kept the URL around, like, I should do something with this. And so you watch those early videos, it's like a 30-second clip of me walking around a convention, or it's like
right.
one of my friends being a dork, or I'm in Japan and we're going to try a snack food. Like, there's no uniformity whatsoever. And then it's like the last, I guess, 6 to 8 months, I kind of looked and I said, I've been doing a lot of tutorials. I'm kind of known for doing a lot of how-to material on how comic books are made and how they're written and how people collaborate and portfolio stuff and things like that. And honestly, typing those up is fine, but there's something really nice and interactive about video. There's something really great, and you get a different connection with people. You can speak much more frankly, and it doesn't have to go through the editorial kind of process quite as heavily.
Absolutely. No, when I first started doing this, I was originally writing blogs and news posts for like entertainment websites, and
Right.
I hated it, man. And I don't know why, because I like talking about this stuff, but then
Sure.
when I found the format of, oh, I can just say things into a
Right.
camera and that'll be the equivalent of like 17 blog posts, I was done with all
Yeah,
that.
I said, like, and I like having the post there, and I know people learn differently. So it's like
Yeah.
those are there as a resource. I've got over 40 different articles that I wrote about, like, how to pitch, how scripts are formatted, what editors do, lots of frequently asked questions and stuff like that. But it's like, okay, let's do some deep dives and kind of organically break down some of the stuff that I was doing, or let's show some really concrete examples while I'm talking about it. And then that just sort of went like, okay, I've said quite a bit and I'm still going to do more. You've heard my voice, seen my face. Like, how can we get other people into this? And it's like,
Totally.
I've got the advantage of, lifelong friends in the industry and peers and people that I love chatting with. And it's like, all right, I'm just going to rope them into this thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I
Yeah.
do the same. I'm trying to do the same thing at the very least with like our offshoot channel that we created here on ComicPop Returns, where I take all the live shows and stuff like that.
Right.
So people aren't just like, oh, this isn't the show with the three guys on the couch. What the hell's this? And it's like,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
this is the other thing, and it's actually as healthy for you, maybe better. Because
Right.
we're getting into the real, like, into the nitty gritty as far as the how the sausage is made, and I want to normalize this kind of collaboration, this kind of conversation with creators, because
Yep.
I think it's really valuable. And it's like we're in this crazy time. Everybody wants to say that like comic books are the new mythology, right? That it's like,
Right.
oh, we're gonna throw away like Egyptian mythology, Christianity. No. It's about Spider-Man. It's about
Yep.
Batman. And like I'm one of those kind of like early converts. I'm more agnostic about it,
Mhm.
but imagine if you had a podcast with like the authors of
Right. Right.
these scriptures and what they might say or what insights they might provide, and we have it now, and it's like,
Right? I think and it's so amazing to be able to talk about this stuff and to be able to talk to peers and kind of go, hey, this is what I do. Is that what you do? And to see
yeah,
both where the similarities, but honestly, where the differences are. I think the thing that sort of has surprised me about doing these interviews with other creators is that my assumptions about some of their processes, or even sometimes the trajectory of their career, because like all of us, I think we all see, after a certain sort of breakthrough point with certain creators, like they had a big title come out and you're like, where did they come from?
yeah,
And then you track back and you go, oh, they've been doing this for like a decade, like,
yes,
and it is a really corny cliche of saying the 10-year overnight success.
hmm,
And yet it does seem almost universally like that is the case. Like
oh yeah,
someone has put in 6, 7, 8, 10 years of stuff, even if it's not stuff above the board, even if it's not with a publisher putting out books on, in your local comic shop. They have been making stuff. They have been doing things and going through that churning kind of process. It's rare that it's shorter than that.
yeah,
Every so often I would see someone that would be like 2 or 3 years, and I go, "Ooh, you're really fast tracking this kind of thing."
right. And they felt like it took forever.
Right? And we always do. One of the ways I describe it sometimes, I say, you're like everyone else's career, you're seeing the highlight reel,
Yes.
right? And yours is like a slow motion car crash. Like you're just constantly, every little bump, every problem, you're like, oh, this isn't working. Oh, I'm falling apart. I don't know if I've got enough going on, or I
Yeah.
haven't made the right connections. And to everyone else, because you're just seeing whatever in Instagram or a Facebook post where they're like, new project. And you're like, new project? How did you get a new project? What is going on?
Yeah.
Forgetting your own little successes and all the ups and downs that you go through. And then
Absolutely.
we have these conversations and you see it all. It's all the same. We've all, even if their path has been very different or the types of things they've done have been extremely different, you realize there's a certain amount of what's common is the tenacity. What's common is the passion for,
Yes.
storytelling and character and the medium of comics,
Yeah.
and that is what really holds it all together.
Right, because it ain't easy and it ain't forgiving. And
Yeah.
if you were going into it for that reason, I get, like, coming from one teacher to another, I get how some people became teachers,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
but no one stays in the comic book industry.
Yeah, the cliche that I've been hearing over and over again says no one gets into this for the money or whatever.
Right.
And that is true. Like if you want to do, and whatever, I could point out almost any industry, and I'm sure someone from that industry would pop up and go, are you kidding? I got into whatever for plumbing or an electrician got into it for the passion of stuff.
Sure.
It's like every industry has their own ups and downs. And I think we all have a lot of grass is greener syndrome.
Yeah.
One of the things that's been really valuable for me, obviously I'm known for writing comics, but the more projects I've done outside of comics, I've done some like media writing stuff. I've done a lot of animation pitch stuff and development. I've done some video game writing. Everyone thinks that their industry is a mess and that someone else's industry's got it all figured out.
Yeah.
And you're just like, no, we're all just navel gazing and kind of confused, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Yeah, you ask people, a lot of people say, oh, you don't get into fill in the blank for the money, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you pulled out to photographers or theater actors or session musicians or like any of these are, prose writers, ask prose writers about how competitive it is in regular book publishing and novels and fiction or even nonfiction. Like creative arts are competitive. People aren't paid what they're worth. And it's a very difficult, weird, winding process because there is no one standard for success. You know what I mean? And that's the real truism. And I don't get me wrong, because it's comics, everyone wants to hold this badge to their chest and kind of go, comics are different. And they're like, they are in terms of a storytelling medium and in terms of their visibility right now on the broader kind of entertainment stage. But in terms of this, like, comic creators are treated like crap. You're like, who else is treated like crap and is about to go on strike? All the support staff in the Hollywood right now, right? Do you know who else is being treated like crap? Graphic designers. Do you know who else is being treated like crap? Photographers, musicians. Like the creative arts are not appreciated properly.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I think saying that does not make it any less true or does not mean we don't want it to change, But yeah, I think sometimes comics can kind of get the chip on its shoulder, like we're extra special bad or extra special good, and you're just sort of like art. It's art,
I think that comes from an apples and oranges situation of, well, right now, because of comics, movies are making more, like certain movies are making more money than ever before. And so it's like, it's a comparative thing, even if it's apples and oranges, because people can't help themselves. Like, well, Spider-Man made $3 billion this year. And it's like, well, I mean, like, yeah, not my book.
Right. And that's not to say that we shouldn't be trying to get comics in more places or improve sales or strengthen the medium or visibility or diversity or any of those things. All those things are true. And there's also this sort of sense of you're not, it's going to be the same whatever industry you get into.
It's the arts.
Right?
Like it's gonna be tough. You're
exactly.
And you're in it because you have passion for it and because you want to be there, or at least you think you can make an impact, which is what I was.
People that trying to shoot an indie film, how much of a hassle and how expensive it is. Like, the one big difference, comics can be produced on a pretty incredible shoestring budget compared to a lot of other storytelling mediums. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, and even then it it gets pricey because people
Oh,
think
it can for sure.
you know, like you could. I love seeing amateur or auteur filmmakers say like, "Oh, you if you have a phone, you can make a film." And I'm like, okay, that's very nice.
Sure.
And maybe if you want to
Yeah.
learn how to like make shot composition or create like a storyboard using your phone, but like no, it's
Yeah.
gonna cost
But
more.
again, I think it's also true of a lot of these arts that people go into it and their misconception, not a misconception, their desire is
Yes,
that the first thing they release is of professional quality and is of the highest caliber and will instantly
catapult.
catapult them to visibility and success, right?
Absolutely.
But everyone goes through a growing process and a learning process. And if I tell you, like, the first time you pick up a basketball, you're not going to be a pro basketball player, you're like, well, no guff, you're going to train. And yet, when it comes to the arts, there's this weird facet where people go, oh, I'm not talented, therefore I will not try.
Yeah.
You
That's
know?
funny. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
interesting. And yeah, well, I think there's something to be said for like, you know, innate talent and then there's
sure.
like what like sports, it's actually you have to exercise that muscle.
Right, right,
I think with the arts there is an expectation because it's like, well, but I shared something personal about
right,
myself and
right.
it means so much to me, it must mean something to everybody else. As opposed
Absolutely.
to I'm not good at basketball, obviously I wouldn't be a pro ball
Right.
player.
Right. But the same kind of passion that goes into starting to play and then spending time doing it and obsessing over it and building those skills is the
Yeah,
same kind of thing you're going to do in the arts, right?
exactly.
And so, but the difference, of course, being as well, you need to open yourself up to outside influences and other things. Like
Yeah.
if you're the comic book creator who is literally only reading comics, you're going to be, just sort of kind of buttressing yourself into a very, very tight corner.
Completely. Oh yeah, no,
Yeah,
and if you're a
yeah,
content creator, in our case, we needed like a variation of opinions
right,
and perspectives and backgrounds in order to give this kind of like niche thing.
yeah,
Because otherwise, it's just gonna be the same thing you've heard 1,000 times before, or read 1,000 times before, or seen a
right.
thousand times before.
Right. And I talked to my students. So for a little bit of background, if people don't know, because you said from one teacher to another.
That's right.
So I teach at a college here in Toronto, a college called Seneca. I've been part of their animation program since 2004 as
Wow.
faculty. Started part-time, then went full-time, and then became coordinator of the program. So I was like hiring instructors, developing curriculum. So it's not even just my own courses. It's how does this all kind of holistically fit together,
Yeah.
and it's about art and storytelling and design. And our graduates have gone on to work on major productions at major studios. So we had a bunch of students work on Spider-Verse movie, or they're at Marvel doing special effects on a bunch of those many special effects companies you'll see come up during the credits. We've got people at Disney and Pixar and Blizzard and all these other companies that they've worked at, and we need to train them and kind of get them thinking about those skills that they're going to utilize, but also how they interact with each other in terms of teamwork and all that sort of stuff. And those skills, both in terms of my ability to teach it, but then also to explain stuff and to organize it, has been so valuable for me in my own freelance career. And the school has been really supportive about me continuing to work, that I'm writing, that I'm working, that I'm drawing and doing other things, because that just bolsters what they do, and that everything we're doing is current and relevant.
Well, it reminds me of if you're a doctor of education or
Yeah,
of English or history, and you're expected to write like a dissertation or some kind of
right,
like scholarly work. That your body of work is kind of the equivalent thereof, right? It's
right,
like
right. It's funny in that way, but it is like, so every 4 years you actually, as full-time faculty, you have to prove your relevancy. And the
exactly.
funny thing is that the first time I went through one of those review processes, I literally just brought in a stack of books and put it on the desk of the dean. And I was like, here's some comics. And he just sort of laughed and he goes, well, there you go. And, it's like the easiest review process. I think it was like 5-10 minutes. And then he goes, so how's your family? What's new? Kind
Right.
of thing. Because I haven't stopped, I haven't
Exactly.
stopped making stuff. And that's been a joy, obviously, for me to be able to do. But it always, keeps me thinking and keeps me honest, I guess, if you will.
Of course. And
Yeah,
you haven't stopped since 2001. You've been working in the comics industry
yeah,
or some
yeah.
fringe
So
thereof.
it's funny you mentioned that. So it's literally last week I tweeted about this. It's been 20 years since my first comic, which
That a makeshift
sounds
miracle?
That is my webcomic, Makeshift Miracle. That was a thing that I did for fun. It was a hobby. Like, I was working in animation at the time. And, when you start in the animation industry, and this is true of comics or any other business, you generally, unless you're an independent creator doing your own thing, you're not going to be a decision maker. You're not going to get to choose where stuff goes or how stuff gets executed. You are executing someone else's vision,
Exactly.
and that's fine. That's where you build up those skills and learn a lot. But I really wanted to tell a story, and I never went to conventions growing up, comic conventions or things like that. I knew about indie publishing, or you hear about stuff like, Dave Sim doing 300 issues of Cerebus, and you're just like, wow, how did you do that? Or how did the Turtles starting as a indie book and all this stuff. Yeah. But the process of making a thing and then getting it published just seemed like black magic. Like, I don't know how you get from there to there and who approves this thing or how it works.
Yeah.
But when I was in college, going to school, and the internet was coming into its own, I saw webcomics for the first time.
Right.
And I was like, oh, this makes sense to me. You put up a website and then people go to it. Oh, okay, I get it. And guys like the Penny Arcade guys were just getting going. Yes. And PvP, like Scott Kurtz was doing his own thing, and there was a bunch of little fandom comics. Howard Taylor was doing this strip called Schlock Mercenary, and I was like, most of them were modeled after like comic strips. Yeah, the newspaper strip style stuff. And they were building up their audience. But that just made sense to me. So I was like, oh, I can do that. Mm-hmm. And so I got a website and I started posting my own comics. But even then it was weird because I was like treating it like very professional. I think I did 12 or 15 pages before I posted page 1. I was like, oh, wow. I need to have a buffer because I've got a busy job and things are going to be difficult and whatever. And put together the website, figuring out how it all worked. There were parts of that website I had to hand code the HTML to make format all the thing. God, I feel like such an old man saying all this. And then started posting these comics, and slowly but surely learning how to tell a story in a comic, but learning also about kind of the broader comic community, which was such a big deal to me, like when someone else who was doing a webcomic contacted me and they said, oh, I really like this, or, oh, this looks really nice. I was like, oh, it's real now. Like we're making contacts, and that would lead to my first professional interactions. And that would lead to my first conventions, and slowly but surely kind of broadening my understanding of publishing and comics and storytelling and art and like everything. And so, 20 years, from then, which sounds so weird to say that out loud, has got me here. And it's a very twisted, weird kind of path with gaps. There were whole areas where I stopped making comics and I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to focus on this part of my career. I'm going to try this sort of thing, but I couldn't give it up. You know what I mean? Like, had to keep doing it. And then the breakout for most people to see my stuff was 2010. So that was when Skull Kickers launched at Image.
Yep.
But I had been doing stuff for like 8 or 9 years before that. Yeah. And that's a strange thing, because in some ways I wanted Skull Kickers to be the first thing that people knew, because it's like, oh, it's an Image book. It looks really good and it's polished and highly professional. And like, where did you come from? Nowhere. I've just appeared for the first time. This is where you see me. Look at this cool book and let's play. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But even then, it's not like that book came out and my phone was ringing off the hook or anything. Like,
oh, sure.
My first work for hire was 2012. So it was almost 2 years later. Yeah. And that was for Dynamite. I did their Pathfinder series. And that was my first sort of monthly, work for hire gig and build up bit by bit by bit. It's not until 2014 that I even do work for Marvel. I'd done a little bit for DC in 2013, but it's like 1 credit, 2 credits, little short stories. And then you finally get that toehold and you hope you don't, lose it. Right.
Yeah. Now, when you get into doing a monthly book for the first time, because Skull Kickers, that's for Image.
Right.
Let's walk a little bit through that process, because it's not the same thing as doing a monthly book for Dynamite or Marvel.
Yeah, totally. I mean, Image is kind of unique in the industry in that way. For it is, it sounds really corny, but it's so true. Like made for creators by creators,
Yep.
with all the good. And in some case, and when I say bad, I don't mean as a publisher, but just like because they give the creator all the control and you get your hand on the steering wheel. There's also no overarching someone like cracking the whip and saying you must, deliver this, do this thing. Like there's always highly recommended. You know what I mean? Like we've agreed we want to publish this. We really like it. Oh, what is the schedule going to be? You tell them the schedule. If you blow that schedule,
that's it.
You just keep going. Like, when's the book coming? When it comes out or whatever, And that's not to say that's a bad thing. It's great to be able to put that power in someone's hands, but it also means that you can easily, whether it's financially or schedule wise, things can kind of fall off a cliff and you're sort of left to your own device to get that thing back on track.
Yeah. Oh, you've heard a 1,000 stories of, well, not really 1,000, but like plenty of stories of books that were motivated independently that fall off the public consciousness.
Yeah.
And then, 10 years later, they're like, we're coming back and we're doing this thing. And I hope you remember it.
But there's also something really impressive. Like, I was talking to Rebecca Taylor. She's an editor over at Vault now, and she did a lot of stuff at DC and things like that. We had a great conversation. And she was talking about the fact that something like a creator-owned book is such a good calling card because everyone on an editorial level knows how much work is involved in putting this stuff together. So if you're able to create something that can stand toe-to-toe with, any other publisher in the industry and do that consistently on your own, well, what could you do for us?
Right. Because that dovetails perfectly into writing for comics because it is, everyone will tell you, because I think that there is probably, I remember a Scott Kurtz interview where he said, I bet 80% of PvP readers just want to be me. Like just want to have my position.
Sure.
And so when they listen to my shows and they listen to my podcast and everything like that, they're listening for tips on how to get to where I am, as opposed to just being die-in-the-wool PvP fans. And
sure.
He's never minced words when it comes to anything, particularly that element.
And I won't, like early on, my ability to organize and say, here's a tutorial on how things are done was a really valuable way for me to stand out because I was able to organize these thoughts and kind of go, here's a really useful bit of advice. And someone goes, oh, that is a useful bit of advice.
Right.
Well, I'm going to follow this guy. Well, if he's talking about how to do it and that makes sense, maybe his stories are good too, but it was like almost secondary in their minds to, the tutorials and stuff. Or I would have editors that were pointing freelancers towards my how to pitch. And then they literally came to me and they go, I've never asked you to pitch for me. I feel guilty. I've hired a bunch of people
who learned how.
Advice. Yeah. And then I never went to the source or whatever you want to call it. It's not like I had some masterful different thing. It's just sort of codifying some of that stuff a little bit more.
Yeah.
But, and it's really flattering. It's really nice to hear that people have, or someone comes to me at a convention and hands me an indie book that they've developed. And they said, I followed your method and we got picked up by a publisher and whatever. And it's awesome,
Yeah.
But then also making sure, like I remember when I got announced on Thunderbolts at Marvel, and one of the things I said, I think in an early interview was, I've talked for a long time about how to do books, like, and now I'm operating on this level. I better not screw it up, like, not just in general for my own career, but also because I've been saying, here's how to do it.
Yeah. And now I'm doing it. And,
like,
or at least doing it on a more public scale. Because you've been doing it. That's the thing.
Yeah, I have been doing it. But it's that expectation of, okay, now you're on whatever, upper level of like you said, visibility.
Right.
You don't want to publicly face plant there. Like that's,
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the thing. And one of the things that was so helpful to me when I was at the Udon studio and I worked as an editor and an art director for a while there, figuring out what I needed and being able to communicate that to the freelancers I was working with meant that when I was freelancing for IDW or Dynamite or Marvel or Dark Horse or anybody, I know what they're going to ask for. Like I know what I would need to see to make this project flow. Let's get ahead of that and do that for them.
Yeah. From that editorial perspective, and from the creation angle, my thinking was, most of these viewers who watch this show, or at the very least who read comics, I think everybody reads comics has a pitch.
Sure. Sure.
And they all fancy themselves writers and creatives because they're
Right.
reading creative work, and they want.
And it's funny that a lot of them are fancy themselves writers specifically.
Well, because I came up with the idea.
Right.
The story.
And the art end of it, I think it's, there's obviously people who try to put this in the right terms, delude themselves a little bit that they're professional quality before they are,
Totally.
but they're not yet.
Yeah.
But they could be with enough hard work or whatever.
Yeah.
But that feeling of like, you can tell if you're not at it, most people could tell they're not operating at a professional drawing level.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't
put themselves out there that quickly, or that
Whereas a writer, you're like, well, this story sucks. I could do better than that.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of garbage out there. There's a lot of garbage TV. There's a lot of garbage movies. There's a lot of garbage everything.
Yeah.
If you're measuring yourself and saying, I can do better than garbage, you're like,
you're not really challenging yourself, are you?
Great. You could be one step higher than the worst stuff being published. Ooh, we got to hire this person.
Right.
In order for you to get in there and stay in there, you've got to be operating at something in the upper half, upper third in terms of output and consistent. Totally. It's not just about coming up with one story idea. It's also about coming up with story ideas every month, every few weeks, and being able to operate within the parameters of what they're asking for. Because inevitably, as much as these people say, oh, I've got an amazing pitch, they come to you and they say, I would do this with whatever, Wolverine or whatever character. And then if someone says, no, you can't do that, what else you got?
That was the best idea I had. What am I going to do now? You got to have like 6 or 7, 10, 12, 40 of them.
Yeah. Or that's a cool idea, but you also have to incorporate these 3 other things. And
right.
You're like, oh, how? But still don't lose your voice and still make it all sort of fit,
Yeah.
And, hey, there's an event coming, or whatever.
That's going to throw things
right?
into a bit of a tumult. But when it comes to these people who are looking for advice and creative outlet, I know that every time you ask a comic book creator, what should I do? How do I break in? They say, make your own book.
Sure.
Be your own
make
creator.
Your own comics. Yeah.
And I think that, because I've heard that 1,000 times, but it doesn't
feel very full until.
No, it doesn't. But someone I don't remember who it was. Might have been you. Who knows? But like but somebody outlined, like, it's not about having this book, because then if you tell someone who's bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, make your own comic book, that's how you're going to break into the industry.
I did it. Now what?
Right. And now what? And I got to put, and I have to motivate myself to put like the most personal, like this is going to be it. Like the independent filmmaker who thinks this is going to be the next Tarantino movie. It's my first thing I've ever done. And I don't have good sound. You're not showing publishers and other creatives that this thing is the next Alan Moore.
Right.
You're showing them that you can do these jobs in the industry.
And again, that you're also, one of the things I'll say this all the time in terms of creative process, like, start a thing, start a project, finish a project, look at it, evaluate it, be honest with yourself. Is this of the caliber that you want to present? And there's sort of the two extremes. There are the people who are like, well, of course it is, because I made it, and they'll just throw out the whatever garbage they made.
Right.
And they're like, why hasn't the industry recognized my genius? And the other end of it is people who are so nervous, like it's not as good as
it's not there yet.
Yeah, I got to keep refining the one thing. And you're like, no. It is okay to finish a thing and for it to not even be what you wanted it to be.
Right.
But it exists now as a thing that you can evaluate and learn from.
Yeah.
And then go again. And so one of the things I recommend early on, and not because this is going to necessarily get you the job, but just to get you on the path, is to do short stories. Because what that does is it's sort of it's like hitting fast forward in terms of your career stuff, because what you're doing, is you're starting and finishing a thing.
Yeah.
It's manageable, so you can really get your head around it. Like so many times I'll hear people say, oh, I've got this amazing epic story idea. And it's like, whoa. If you were going to run a marathon, you don't like go, 15 miles on your first go. You gotta like get the shoes, and you got to go around the block, and you got to figure out what your pace is and all these sorts of things.
Yeah.
And then when you're collaborating with other people, just assembling that group and having that cohesiveness, right? So like a short story allows you to hyper kind of focus. So you go, okay, we're going to do 6 pages as an example, or 10.
Sure.
6 pages is organizable, it's doable, it's finishable. Do we get along well? Does this whole process work? Are we communicating properly? Do we have a good rhythm? does the art feel like it marries well with the story? Does the artist enjoy doing this? How long did it take everybody to do the thing?
Yeah.
Can we refine it and level it up to a professional level? And then you've got it, you finished it, and you go, is this good? And it's
Right.
like, if the answer is no, that's actually not great, but it's not as bad as you might think, because it's almost like the first date that you go, yeah, maybe not, stay in touch, take care, bye,
Sure. Yeah. You don't want to,
because
you don't want to commit yourself to
yeah,
this thing that
we had
isn't.
one dinner instead of like, oh no, now we're trapped in it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and so that's the thing, is you get to test that stuff out and try something, and everybody learns, and then you walk away, or you go, this was amazing, we got to do more, we got to dig in deeper, we got to try something more ambitious. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the way to really kind of get up to speed on this stuff, as that proving ground. And that's why you should make your own comics, because not just because you want to make things, you want to have that portfolio, but whatever advice I give you or anyone else gives you, as much as we can give you pitfalls and say, watch out for these things, a certain amount of it will never be clear until you have done it, until you have made the mistakes,
Yes.
until you have, dropped the ball, screwed something up, sent the wrong email, and then been like, oh God, what am I doing?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's true of also every creative pursuit. I think every filmmaker, you got to make film, you got to, and also to know what other people's jobs are. I think that's something that's really hard to explain to people, because they want to silo themselves. So the writer's the perfect example. They want to be the writer because in the current comic industry, and it seems to wax and wane, the writers are the
star,
the front men. They're the whatever on the mic of this band, or whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
And so they want their name on the front. They want it to be whatever, Dan Slott's Spider-Man, even though there are a dozen artists that worked on that run. Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
Or whatever, Kieran Gillen's Thor, or like any of those kind of things, Jason Aaron, or all those guys, like they're known for those runs. And it's the shortcut that everyone uses when they talk about a run of comics.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And yet, when I think about it, when I was growing up, it was always like the pair. So it was like, Claremont Byrne, like that's a very specific thing. I don't just say, the Claremont X-Men. You're like,
right.
The Claremont X-Men. First of all, that's like 16 years, so it's a little hard to.
And there's a couple of seminal periods. Like, do you mean?
Sure.
Yeah. Which artist are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Right. I'm talking about the Art Adams annuals. They're really, really good. But whatever that might be. So I get it from that point of view, that as the writer, you want to have that creative concept
distinction.
Right. But you also need to know everyone else's jobs, and that doesn't mean you have to be a professional quality artist, letterer, colorist, or editor. But the more you know about those jobs, the better you'll be at your job.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so the most potent education I had when I was at the Udon studio was getting under the hood and learning all that stuff and seeing what everyone else was doing and trying to build stuff, and watching schedules slip, or watching things, last minute saves from disaster, and pulling stuff out of the muck, and being like, oh, that's how real creativity happens. Compromises and communication, and, everyone pulling together under the gun to make stuff work.
Yeah.
And then it was like normalizing all that stuff also. So I went, okay, when things go wrong, I'm not just like throwing up my hands and going, this isn't how it's supposed to work. Like every project is a little bit of a duct taped plane going off the runway. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Especially when it comes to creative pursuits, and especially when it comes to such a collaborative medium like the one we're talking about.
And that ability to see that it's not just about your idea, that the artist needs to be invested and dedicated to what's going on.
Yeah.
And that they're going to bring themselves into the process. And that is a good and healthy and wonderful thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If you have it all figured out in your head, then go draw it.
Right.
Otherwise, if someone else is coming into it, work with them, build with them. Some of my favorite moments from some of my projects are things that the artist put on the page, and then I get these kudos. They're like, oh, the way you've tied that all together visually, and or that callback to that earlier issue. You're like, sometimes I specifically ask for that, a bunch of times I don't.
What were some of the things that you learned from publisher to publisher about the similarities within the industry, but also some
Right.
of the major, like, oh, it is very different working for, like,
Right.
writing for.
Oh, totally, totally. It's less publisher to publisher and it's more editor to editor. Like within
Really?
a publisher, you will have very different kind of expectations, in terms of how much information they need up front, how integrated they want that approval process, how finicky they're going to be about everything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then it's even your relationship at the start of a project versus 3 or 4 projects in with the same editor.
Sure.
You build up creative capital. Like one of the most difficult things I was trying to explain to some people, Gail Simone started that hashtag comic school. And so I will use that to tag a bunch of my stuff because there's a whole bunch of people who want to learn how to make comics
Yes.
that still follow it and will post material and stuff like that. And one of the most common things people say is, oh, okay, Jim's got a format for pitching. This is how you should format a pitch. And I go, look, I have a bunch of suggestions for pitching.
Yeah.
But the successful pitch is the one that gets picked up. It doesn't really matter if you follow this or not. I have ways that I explain it that I feel are really valuable, but in the end, it's still creativity. You're going to come up with your own way of doing this stuff, or this particular pitch won't need every part of this thing.
Oh, yeah.
But all that being said, my life now as a writer is very different. The way I pitch things now is actually not like that tutorial very often.
Mm-hmm.
Because
you're a different writer, you're a different person.
Yeah,
like,
but I've also built up a certain amount of publishing capital, like with these editors.
yes.
So, like if Tom Brevoort and I have done, God, 7, 8 projects at Marvel.
Yeah.
Like if he comes to me and says, "Do you want to do a thing?" I say, "Yeah," and then I'll type a couple paragraphs in an email, and then we might jump on a call, or I might formalize it depending on if I'm trying to do something really funky. But most of it is just like, he knows I can tell a story. He knows I can get it in on time and do all that stuff. So there's no point in me writing this textbook.
You don't have to go through all the same kind of trappings that a novice might have to,
right,
or should go through.
And the monthly book, you do all that up front. Like, here's my characters. Here's how they're all going to interrelate. Here's how it's all going to work. Once you're on issue 8 or 9, I don't have to re-explain the wheel to you. I just go, all right, so here's what's happening this issue. This goes forward, this moves back. I think we're going to throttle this thing and change it up a little bit. Is that okay? Yeah, sounds good. All right, we're on. Let's go.
Yeah.
What's the solicit? Like, that's kind of the thing on there.
Right, absolutely.
But like Tom's a very different editor from the other, like David Hedgecock over at IDW, or like any of the different editors that I've worked with over the years. Like, they've all got their own kind of thing, and sometimes that's based on the license that we're working with. So you've got that extra level of approvals. Like if we're doing Samurai Jack, now Cartoon Network has to approve everything before we even get to doing the issues. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's kind of interesting because you also you worked on Samurai Jack for IDW back in the day.
Yeah.
I think it was like 7 years ago. But
yeah, that sounds about right.
But now you do Conan, and as I understand it, it's not as simple as, well, we own Conan now.
Right.
There is an estate you have to work with, and you have to uphold.
It's less an estate. So there's a company. It was Cabinet, but they recently just sold, I think, everything to Funcom. So the video game company now has kind of eaten up, and all the people that were part of Cabinet now, I think they work for Funcom or as part of Funcom. It's probably some sort of merger. And so all the Robert E. Howard properties are part of that. And they sign off on everything we're doing. And Marvel has licensed that stuff.
Exactly.
Right. So first I've got to get through the goalpost of like, does my Marvel editor, Mark Basso, does he like this thing? Does he think it's cool and viable? And that's a filter. And then does Conan Properties via Cabinet, do
they agree? Like, well, he's got to, I assume, take it to them and say, like, we have.
Do they have questions, right?
Oh, sure.
And sometimes it's usually just clarifications. Like, it's just like, oh, I think you're doing this, right? Yes, we're doing that. Yeah, let me just put a button on that. This is exactly where we're going with it, or this is how we're going to do. Or they'll just remind us of certain character traits to emphasize, or things that they want to see, right?
Don't forget Conan's a thief, that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, just any of those kinds of things, right? Or whenever I've had like Conan, you know, you're trying to tussle with this character with a huge legacy, and you've had multiple writers over the years, right?
Yeah.
And then you have sort of the mythic quality of people's expectations, what they think of in the general public, and you're trying to ratify those things while also do something new and do something entertaining, right?
Exactly. With Jack, I can imagine that was even more complicated, given that the show had ended but not concluded.
Right. That's
And
right.
the ending hadn't come yet.
That's right.
So I
That's
can
right.
imagine them saying, "Okay, well, did they upfront say don't end it or don't like
Right. So
were there things you couldn't do?"
yeah, so we were like, originally that was supposed to just be a mini series. That's what was really interesting. So they did here's a really interesting pitching thing. So sometimes you will be approached as a freelancer and they'll say, "We think you're a really good fit for fill in the blank.
Oh.
Send us your idea." Or sometimes you will, you know, be told there are multiple people pitching on this same project. The catty term we use for it is a bake off. Right? So it's a bake off. There's 4 writers and you're all throwing your ideas in. And usually you don't know who those other writers are.
Yeah.
I found out everyone that pitched on Samurai Jack because a lot of them came by my table at the next convention and they were like, "You son of a bitch." Like, you're just like, oh, you know. Probably the most interesting version of that, Andy Suriano, he is one of the designers of the Jack show, and he was the artist on the comic series. We're really good friends now. He's amazing. He does directing over at Disney. He's done a lot of TV stuff. The new Turtles cartoon, the one with those really wild graphic designs, that's all Andy's stuff.
Wow.
Right? So he's amazing. He's also one of the fastest artists I've ever seen in my life. And Andy told me this story, and I've said this on panels before, so I don't mind saying it. And he goes, I was cheating to get the Samurai Jack gig. I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, I knew they were going to do a comic and I worked on the show. So I was going to, you know, work on it. I wanted to write and draw it." Oh. And so through my Cartoon Network contacts, I got to see all the pitches.
Oh.
And I was like, "Oh, you bastard," like this, right? And he goes, "Oh, I mean, I'd already submitted mine as well." And he goes, "And I read yours and I liked it better than mine."
Oh, that's always
like,
gotta feel good.
I wanted to draw your story. And so like, I also kind of said, "This is the one, we should do this one." And I was like, holy crap. You know what I mean? Like, that is such a cool feeling.
Yeah.
So we pitched this idea called The Threads of Time, and it was a 5-issue mini of this concept of kind of doing a multi-part story of Jack having a chance to possibly get back, and how could we amp up the stakes and make it as epic as possible.
Yeah.
And it felt like an extended version of the show, like a movie length kind of crazy epic thing. And it went over so well. We got tons of good press. And then they said, "Do you have more ideas?" I was like, "Oh, I got all the ideas." And so they said, "Okay, 5 more issues." And so I started doing onesies and twosies, like 1-shot stories and 2-parters. And then they were like, 5 more. And I was like, "Great, we're up to 15 now." And then I was like, "Oh man, this is going great. People are loving it." And it was so funny because I just got into my head like, "Oh, they're just going to keep extending us."
Right.
And then they were like, "Okay, we're ending at 20." And I was like, I've got like, I could do like 20 more, you know, I would totally up for this. But then I kind of got into my head, and at the time there was no talk of continuing the show at all. Right. None. And so I said, "Look, on our last issue, can we do like a possible future? Like, can we do like an ending if there is no ending kind of thing?" And they were like, "Oh, it's going to be pretty tough, you know, but we really like you and we like what you've been coming up with." So I pitched them this 1-shot story, and they approved it. And so we had this kind of spiritual end. Like, if we end up being the finale, this is kind of how I would envision it all kind of coming together.
Yeah.
And Andy drew the hell out of it. Really, really proud of it and all that kind of stuff. And it was a rare kind of moment where the licensor gave us more latitude than I'm used to. You know what I mean? Yeah. And of course, you know, Gendy and the crew came back and they did do that 5th season, and they did a great job and took it to the finish line. And so our thing kind of exists as this sort of elseworldsy kind of, and that's cool. You know, one of my, the most kind of fun things is when people bring me that issue, or when they tell me, "Oh man, I read this thing and I absolutely, you know, freaked out," or whatever.
For me.
Yeah. Before they announced they were going to do that 5th season, I did what convention was I think it was Awesome Con. I was at Washington, DC, and Phil Lamar and I did a panel, and he read the issue.
No.
Yes, at the panel. And that's
was like, dope.
one of the coolest. I read a couple of the background characters and stuff like that. I just sort of chimed in, and there's Phil Lamar, the voice actor for Jack, and this amazing actor, and we're on this panel together. And the funniest thing was that panel, they ended up changing the timing on it, and I had to go right from the convention to the airport, and this panel was like brutal, like right at the end of my time. And so we're literally like, we do this thing, we got a packed convention room, we do that panel, the whole place erupts in applause, and I'm literally like, Phil, this is amazing. We do a quick hug, and I'm like, I gotta grab a cab, like I gotta go to the airport right now. And people are like, oh, will you sign my thing? And I felt like such a like a Hollywood, like I'm sorry, like, I have to go, you know. And I'm like running out the door. It was so crazy. That was fun, man.
That's awesome.
It was wild times. Yeah, it was good.
I love the stories that break from what you expect, and like with respect to, you know, this is working on licensed characters, this is what's working on independent characters, and how it informs you as a writer, and you get to give your own kind of spin on them.
People have their own assumptions about how this stuff works. Like you'll hear these extremes, and it's always people saying like, oh, the editor tells you the story and you're just like a pair of hands robotically typing it out, or vice versa. They'll be like, I don't know why you didn't do this, and you're like, you think I didn't try? You know what I mean? Like and it's everything in between. You know, sometimes you've got some creative latitude, and part of your job, this is a really good holistic kind of big picture. Our job as storytellers and communicators is to entertain and to communicate ideas. And your first audience are the people holding the keys, right? So if I can convince my editor this is an amazing idea, he's or she is going to carry that and go to bat for me and help get it through the halls of power. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
And so they get in, people get in their head like they got to fight with their editors. You're like, if your editor is fighting against this, it's because whatever system or whatever approvals or whatever needs there are of the company outweigh your idea.
Right.
So how do you change that? Your idea has to be that much better, that much more compelling, that much more powerful, that they will then acquiesce to it. Right.
Yeah.
And if you haven't convinced them yet, build your case better, you know, go and you know, contrary to whatever some random angry YouTuber will tell you, the people at these companies are passionate about these characters and they want to build the best stories possible. And we all want to have this thing come out and be something we're proud of, that we look at and we go, look what we made. And we're shaking, blowing people's minds and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And so I've got to convince my editor, this is a great idea. This is the best idea we're going to have. We got to go with this one and put all the power into it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And if I haven't done that, then what's missing?
Right.
You know, right? What part of this, like the classic story that Tom tells about Brubaker pitching him what will eventually be the Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
And so, you know, one of the precepts was like, Uncle Ben never comes back. You know, we never tell Wolverine's origin, and Bucky
stays
dead. Those are like 3 of the 80s, you know, kind of like absolutes, right?
Yep.
And they've broken 2 of those. Right. And you're like, thank you for not bringing Uncle Ben back. But whatever. How do you break down this pillar of editorial precept of we will never cross this line? And somehow they do it and do it brilliantly. And now mythically, it is tied to the character so strongly, it has to be there, right?
Winter Soldier is stronger than the old mantra of Bucky always stays dead.
But that was because Brubaker brought the idea up, and Tom and the other editorial, their eyes rolled back in their head and they go, we've heard 100 times before.
Bring back
Bucky. We're not interested. But Tom, to his credit, says, here's why. Here are my questions. Here are the why has Cap never seen him before? Why would we not have, you know, how is this going to be dramatically interesting? After we've done the shock value of it, what is the value and what does this bring to the broader Marvel universe? And a series of these questions. I think there was like 12 or 20 questions. And Brubaker just dug down and answered them all.
Right.
And once he answered them all in a compelling fashion, Tom, fist shaking, was like, I can't really deny that this is
a great idea.
You know what I mean? And so that's what you need. You need someone in your corner. And if you're not getting that, it's because you haven't convinced them. Do you know what I mean? And people get this way a lot about their creative careers. They they get very upset because they haven't been given those opportunities. And there are a lot of people who get blanked on opportunities. Absolutely. But at some point, if you want to work in that, if you're not just going to make your own stuff, and I think that is obviously the easiest and a really fulfilling way to be creative and to do those things. But if you want to work at a Marvel or a DC or any of these other companies on these properties, you have to convince them you're the right person for the job, or that you're in the running, and then push through with that great proposal, that great pitch, that great concept.
Yeah.
You know, I'm so thankful that, like, I love sword and sorcery. Obviously, it's like deep, you know, in my bones. And because of Skull Kickers, I got the opportunity to work on Pathfinder. And because of Pathfinder, I got to work on, you know, Samurai Jack and Dungeons and Dragons. And now it's like, if there's a story with a sword in it, I'm on the list.
Yeah.
I'm on the list. Like, you know, oh yeah, Conan, like that's something I think Jim would be good at that. You're like, oh, you have no idea. This is like, I love this. I want to do this so much, you know?
Well, I think we talked about how you were in a bake-off over Conan as well.
Yeah, it's like you're constantly having to, you know, prove that element of it. But at least now, if there's dragon in it, I'm in the conversation. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I come to mind. Yeah,
I think that's different from being like typecast.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
or
I think it's a good
pigeonholed.
thing. There was a very thin slice of a few months where I think I felt a little frustrated by it, where I was sort of like, if it doesn't have a sword, no one's calling me. Like, come on, you know.
Yeah, I got other ideas.
Right. And that was also where you can also, you see this with actors all the time.
Yes.
They get typecast for a thing, and then all of a sudden they go in a completely different direction, usually an indie film, usually, you know, some sort of little short film or a indie production. And you're like, I can't believe so-and-so played such an evil character. They were the most wholesome, joyous, or they're a comedian or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can change the trajectory if you want. Like,
right.
The minute that I felt like I was typecast on fantasy, I did Wayward, which is, you know, supernatural, but it's also a teen book, and it's like this ensemble of a group instead of just being individuals. And then I also did Glitter Bomb, which is like a horror story and dark and nasty and sarcastic. And people were just like, this is the Figment guy? Like, what is going on? But that was a way to sort of go, look, I got all kinds of ideas. I got all kinds of stories.
And I'm sure that got you to Thunderbolts. Because
right? Yeah. Because you're not pigeonholing yourself anymore. You're sort of saying, I can do a bunch of different things.
Yeah,
big time. And so that kind of stuff is so valuable, where you go, creative people and decision makers want to make sure bets, as we all do.
Oh, of course.
And they also want to draw the shortest line between 2 points, right? So instead of shaking your fist, go, I don't know why they don't hire me for fill in the blank. You go, am I creating the work that would logically get them to put me on that?
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
I do. Yeah.
And so you've got to let them know, if you want to do horror stuff, you have to make horror stuff.
Right.
If you want to do wholesome stuff for all ages, you should make wholesome stuff for all ages. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it seems so obvious, but I see people all the time where they're like, you know, I remember looking at someone's portfolio when I was at the Udon studio, and, you know, we're doing the Street Fighter books. We've got a bunch of anime, you know, clients and inspired things. And I'm looking at someone's portfolio, and their portfolio is really like horror, gritty, crazy stuff. And I kind of go, this is okay, but like, we're not really doing that sort of thing. And he goes, oh, what kind of stuff do you guys do? And I was like, what? And I sort of point back like this, and he goes, oh, I hate anime. And I was like, cool, man, like, that's fine, you know, but we're probably not a good fit for you, you know?
Right.
And he's like, oh, I was told I have to show my portfolio to people. I'm like, you do, but you also need to show your portfolio to people that are appropriate. Like, you know, there's the joke of like someone who literally sends out 100, you know, pitch packages, or to every studio in town or whatever. And you're like, but if 90 of those would never have ever made this thing, you look like a fool. You look like someone who didn't do their homework, you know?
Absolutely.
Just stuff like that. It's like very, very weird. You know, I don't want to, at Vertigo, when Vertigo was at their height, there were certain editors that did all the crime stuff. You know, your 100 bullets, you're scalped. And there were certain editors that did all the supernatural stuff. and your pitch could get a very different response depending on who opened that package. So you better put to this person instead of to that person.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Like, yeah.
It's
funny how we talk about writing, we talk about being a writer for comics, and it's never just that job. It is everything. It is from when you start as a writer to I want to make a thing, and then you create an independent book and you become an editor and a letterer and a copy editor. Like you're working all these things, but you also need to be, and you learned this, I know it because in 2001 you were a webcomic person, so you knew how to do this. And I was very steeped in the webcomic scene back then as well.
Oh, were you?
I was more of a connoisseur, if you will. I read them a lot.
URLs.
Yes, I read them. I sampled their wares. I dabbled a little bit, but not until like 2005. But you have to be like a Stan Lee. You have to be a carnival barker. You can't.
And now more than ever. Like
exactly.
Everyone is now. I loathe the term brand because everyone says,
but it is brand. Right. Like it's
you. What do people think of when they think of you? Hopefully they think of you, and if they don't, then that's half the problem, right? So, one of the difficulties is that people will, again, I think they want cart before the horse kind of stuff. They want to be known for stuff, or they want their first thing to be the all-encompassing, oh my God. And you're like, well, that's your first thing. You've made a thing, I'm glad you did that, but now make another one. And they're like, oh, that was really hard. Yeah, you got to do a bunch, like that's how that goes. And what do people think of you? So if what I'm putting forth is, and this sounds cynical, but it's not my intent. Like Jim is the hardworking guy who's organized, who is optimistic and excited about you making your own stuff. Like, I think that's a pretty good message,
Yeah.
Hopefully,
can't hurt. Absolutely.
Right? And it's like, that is who I am, but it's also the fine-tuned version of focused on that for public viewing, for lack of a better term. You know
that's
what I mean?
The Zub brand is. Yeah.
Sure. Right. The Zub brand. Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
right? But,
I hate to say it. I don't mean to say it like in a kind of like, sleazy way.
Right. And it's not to say that I don't dislike any stories, because I'm actually very highly critical of my own work and other people's work, but that's not the public facing version. I am not a critic publicly, right? Like I've never been a reviewer. I'm not telling you so-and-so sucks and I can do it better. Like my front facing view is like, I'm going to tell you about the stuff I love. I'm going to tell you about games. I'm going to tell you about stories and comics and movies and stuff that I like. And that other stuff, that the kind of highly critical thing is sort of behind, that's my wife and I chatting about, my friends talking over a beer or something. Like, one of the jokes I say is someone goes, oh, what did you think of whatever? Like, if I don't respond, it's probably,
you can probably guess.
It's probably pretty obvious. I'm not crazy about it, but I don't need, you don't need my opinion on that. I'll tell you what I really like. And that's just my choice, right? Other people have built their entire careers on the critical angle or on the you suck kind of messaging. Sure. And if that works for them, okay, fine, I guess. But that's not, just keep in mind that all this media stuff is so interlinked so much more than it used to be. And you may think you're 10 steps away from whatever movie producer or whatever musician or actor or anything. You're not. You're not anymore, And so if you just sit around just throwing mud everywhere and being like, everyone sucks, this movie sucks, this show sucks, this comic sucks, this art sucks, you're like, you have no idea. You have no idea. Someone
who knows you think they suck.
Right. Like 8 months from now, your thing is on the table and there's a choice and they just go, no, I don't like that person.
Screw that guy.
They don't have to say why.
No.
They just like, and you just got blanked on an opportunity because you wanted to score some Twitter points or whatever. You're like, okay, like that's fill your boots, man. Like you need to be thinking more about that stuff. And that's not to say don't have an opinion or don't, have a political angle or anything like that. The one thing I say to my students, because we talk about this in the third year in portfolio development, just imagine that you have a megaphone and you're screaming this on the street corner. Are you still cool with it? Like,
Right.
because this is forever now, like screenshot and that's you. So
Yeah.
if you want to wear it and you like what you're saying and that is super important to you,
right.
Cool. Like do it. But own it. Like be aware that you've done it. That's
right.
all, you know?
Yeah.
Because you can't take it back. That's all, so.
It's true. Yeah. The internet's forever. And it, yeah, it's frustrating that people's personal identities have become brands.
Of course. Yeah.
But it is,
and that
like,
people feel they have to hypercharge that with
ugh.
either controversy or the characterization of it. Like we're
Yes.
always, the way I try and explain it again to my students is I say, think of it like being on your best behavior. Like if you're going to a family reunion and you like your family, or if you're, whatever it might be, like this is you going on the first date and wanting to make a good first impression. What are you going to be like? How engaged are you going to be? How entertaining? How, just put those traits forward.
Yeah.
And that is ideally what you want to present to the world if they don't have any other preconceived notions,
Totally.
So.
Yeah. Give their only preconceived notions your best as opposed to your most critical. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And, particularly because you can always go more cynical later. You can always tune it down if you need to, but you can't tune it back up very easily.
Right. When you get older, 10 years into the industry, it's like, he's gotten a little bit of a harder edge, but there's some softness there.
A little more, every so often, like I'll shoot out a salty social media post. And I'm like, I shouldn't have done that.
Right.
Yeah. We all have little moments. I'm not perfect at it by any means. Right.
Sure.
But you definitely get a better feel for, okay, these are the hills, whatever, worth dying for. And this is just.
Well, I can imagine the reactions like, oh, that really rubs up the wrong way.
Like, tempest in a teacup kind of stuff. Yeah. The other thing too is I think, we're all afraid about getting hurt. Like the first time you create something, you want to be lauded for it. You want people to be enthusiastic about it. And the two things of like, either no one says anything, which is just like this destructive, oh God, why do I do a thing? Or the negativity where you're like, this sucks, or, I would have done it this way.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, one of the things I sort of say to people is, and I try to just, it's like when your parents would say, just wait till you have kids. You know what I mean? It's like, I say, I mean this genuinely. Like, I hope you create something and I hope it goes well for you because the minute you create something and you put it out into the world, and that vulnerability and that fear of like, oh man, I hope this goes over well. And if it does or doesn't, you're just like, here it is, it changes stuff, and you and the YouTubers, you're putting out so much content. It's a hazing process of like good, bad. They liked it. They hated it. They hated me, they love me. But it's so constant. I think that it sort of washes over you and you just kind of go, oh, okay. It is all the things.
This is what it is now. And it's just, because it used to be, I'm sure, like, oh boy, the Comics Bulletin had a scathing editorial about like something that one month in 1995. And like, or maybe
you're just a shill, or you don't really like this stuff, and you're just
so easily dismissible. Something
sure.
Well, well, also, of course, as we get closer to now, like the veil is lifted. And so, before it's like, it was very easy, the letters pages were all very like easily curated, but also it's like, well, they don't know how the hell anything's run here. So they don't know anything as opposed to like, well, they read my blog, they read all my books, they've watched my YouTube channel. They know who I am as a person. They've met me 16 times at different conventions and they say I suck. That's going to hurt.
Yeah. And they're going to write a dissertation and do a 2-hour YouTube video.
Oh my God.
Line and verse, man, like calm down, and I'll be honest, every so often you get a criticism, and the ones that hurt the most are the ones that, have a truism beneath it, where they got you, like they pegged you, and they go, you notice, Zub always falls back on blah, and you're just
this
like,
device.
Do I? Oh shit, what have I done?
Oh no.
Like, they got me, the sirens are going off and the spotlights, you're like,
oh no. And sometimes that works though. Like, and that's the thing that I try to think of whenever we do that is like, well, I mean, if you didn't do that, how would it be? Like, would it disrupt the whole narrative? And it's like,
Well, and it's like, you want to be able to ideally step outside yourself and identify I'll give you an example. So when I was teaching, there was one class, you don't know you're doing it. If you have any vocal tics or anything else when you're a teacher or a YouTuber or anything else,
you'll find them.
people will, oh yeah, if you repeat a particular phrase, that's going to be in the comments or someone's going to zing you with it all the time,
Yep.
right? And so one of the earliest classes I taught, I guess I said the words, the key to this is, so the key to that. And so the students at the end of the term got me like a big jangly ring of keys, and they dumped it on my desk and they said, here are all the keys that you gave us back. And I was just like, what? You know, we were like, there's a key to a lot of things, Jim. You apparently every class had 10 keys. And I was like, oh my God, do I really say that? You just don't know. If you know, I remember there was a teacher when I was in like middle school, and they would always have this weird vocal tick where they would say but they would like extend it. So go and like hold it a little long, and you look at each other like, what was that sound?
Right.
2 classes into it, you're trying not to snicker. And then by class 4, someone is literally marking a little list, and then they've got a bar chart that they're tracking. They're like, today was a 45 day, and you know, this week's good. He only hit 12 ums. And they're like, that's what students will do to amuse themselves if you're not engaging, if you're not, or if they pick up on something that they can, you know, and in some ways it's brutal and embarrassing to be told that, you always say this stupid thing, the keys or whatever. But then once I heard that, I go, oh, okay, I got to not do that. Like, I gotta carve that out of my vocabulary.
Come up with another thing, another transitionary phrase or something.
Yes.
I do the same thing.
I think you have to, but it's good in the sense of like, okay, we have a little bit of fun, laugh it off. Now let's do a thing. One of the other things was really valuable for me was one of the earlier classes I taught of drawing. We were doing figure drawing, and I don't know if you've ever seen life drawing. You've literally got like a nude model in front of you. You've got a huge piece of parchment paper and Conte or charcoal, and you're doing a quick sketch.
Yes.
And in the moment, you're going to get down the gesture, the form, and the proportion, and then you're going to start building on top of it. And with animators and a lot of gesture drawing, you're doing 15, 30 seconds, a minute long starting of the pose. A long pose is 5 to 10 minutes. 10 minutes, you're going to have some sort of drawing there, and hopefully it looks really good. And I'm doing one of these sketches in a demonstration for a class. And right from the first 3 lines, I can tell this isn't working.
Sucks.
It sucks. And you've literally got 25 people behind you watching this happening in real time.
Yeah.
And I could feel sweat starting to form, like my pits, like everything. I'm just like, oh no. And I'm like trying not to shake, and I'm trying to talk my way through this. And I just stopped, and the class is dead silent, like pin drop worthy. And I'm like, they know it, I know it. And then I stop and I go, sometimes it doesn't work right off the bat and you got to start over. And I drop that sheet of paper and we start over. And there was this collective like, exhale.
Yes.
He knew it was garbage. Okay. Just
Yeah.
making, you know, and I said, it's not about getting it right. It's about, you know, what went wrong, and then let's start over again. Second one went much better. The whole class starts to giggle and laugh, and we're all good again. The energy comes back and you're good, right? It's not about being perfect.
Right.
And that is so, so crucial. I have written a ton of stories I'm incredibly proud of. I have worked on so many projects that I love, and I want people to love everything that I do, of course. But there's stuff that didn't go the way I wanted. There's collaborations that didn't go the way I wanted. There's stuff out there in print with my name on it, and I kind of go, no, geez. But I learn stuff, and I continue to learn stuff, and I'm going to keep plugging away and you know, deliver the best that I can under the circumstances, right?
Absolutely.
And when it works, it's absolutely magical. You know, it's the best, coolest feeling when the creative team's all pushing together and we're collaborating, and it's even better than I'd hoped.
Right.
Or you're like, I think it's going to be here, and they throw more ideas into the mix, and now it's something even grander than we'd ever imagined. You know, those are the kinds of things that are so cool. And it's like, I've written probably over 300 issues of comics at this point. They're not all going to be, you know, like the Oscar worthy, whatever you want to call it, Eisner glory thing. There's going to be a range there, but they're all obviously, I think, of a professional level. And then there's some that I like hold closer and dearer and nearer and whatever, but you learn from it and you grow from it and you keep plugging away. The one thing, if I just threw in the towel, and there've been times, you know, I think we all the people talk about imposter syndrome.
Sure.
All the time. And it's weird because it seems it's universal as a concept, and yet everyone internalizing goes, no, my version
is not
the real.
Yeah.
See, what did someone call it? I read a thing, someone called it meta imposter syndrome, where they were like, yes, imposter syndrome exists, but you don't understand. I can properly evaluate quality, and I know I'm garbage. You know what I mean? And you're like, wow, right? And it's not that I don't have writer's block or imposter syndrome or all those things. The difference is that I have on all, I wouldn't say every project, but on a lot of projects, you hit that moment of, oh man, I suck. This sucks.
Right.
The difference is I figured it out and I came out the other side and we published a book.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of it and I like it. And it wasn't so bad because I have literally, so this bookshelf, these are just my books. So 1, 2, 3, there's 5 shelves. It's off camera here that are just my books. It's surreal and strange.
Yeah.
Because I've done that so many times, I know that this is the moment I feel like crap, not this is the moment I am crap.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Feel you'll come out the other side because you know it's just a mental thing. It's
like a weird anger, like I'm here again.
You're right. Haven't we moved past this already?
Yeah, come on, man. Like you finished so many things, but you're like, no, this is the moment where I feel like I can't do it. And I get up, go for a walk, maybe step away from the thing, get someone else's feedback, whatever it's going to take to break through. But at least I have enough evidence that I go, oh man, I'm doing this rather than being like, I am this. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a really big thing. So
that's a thing and it's across the board. Like no matter what, whatever profession you're in, whatever skill set you're at, you are going to get to that point where you're like, I'm in a bad place or I can't do, it's not working.
Right.
And, the difference between success and failure, true success and failure, whether it's successfully accomplished or the failure of you abandoned it. And that's how I really measure it is getting out of it or coming up with a solution.
Coming to the other side, finishing the thing, and then being able to evaluate it, hopefully with a little bit of clarity and distance that I can then go, that wasn't as bad as I thought, or this is genuinely not what I had hoped. What can we learn or what can I do to not have this happen again?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Oh, totally.
And sometimes that post-mortem is more valuable than even the doing. It's like the ability to step back and go, whoa, this whole thing got screwed up. How did it go wrong? Was it me? And it's usually a combination of factors. And as much as you want to just say it was all them or it was all me, it's somewhere in the middle of that whole thing most of the time, and it's like, that's okay too, and the difference being like, if you're in this to stick in it, like to do it, you're just going to keep making stuff. You're just going to keep doing things,
Exactly.
And it's not about, people get really wound up on, oh, if I just had that one interaction or that one meeting or that one pitch, or if someone asked me what I thought, my whole life would change. And it's like, those moments are so rare.
Yes.
Most of the time it's a much more incremental kind of evolution.
Yeah.
And you're not going to fail spectacular. The world is not America's Got Talent. You know what I mean? You're not going to get up on stage and
that's
have
your one shot.
That's it. It's everything. The world, the universe is not a manga where if you just scream and concentrate more with speed lines shooting behind you, this is my moment or whatever, that everything's going to work out. Like it's a bunch of rises and falls and failures and successes. And the overall trajectory is what you push through and make it,
Yeah.
I tell my students all the time, I'm like, I'm not doing any of the things I thought I was going to do when I was in school. Like I thought I was going to be a Disney animator and live in California or Florida and work on those 2D animated films that they do so often now.
Oh, sure. Those are
right. Or whatever. Like I wanted to be a Disney animator and because it looked magical and amazing and you get to have this cool creative space. Yeah. And then as that evolved, you're like, oh, it's like Pixar or it's, CG or whatever. And then you sort of go, oh, the whole industry's changed underneath me. Like 3D literally happened while I was finishing school, the huge transition. And I just went, I'm a dinosaur the minute I hit the industry. Oh my God,
Yep.
And that's okay. Like who I thought I was going to be and who I am, I'm very much at peace with now.
Yeah.
But what I learned was that what was really speaking to me about those films, and what still speak to me about comics and games and movies and all this stuff, is storytelling. I was always about the story. I was always about the characters and the development and the enrichment of those things. And once I realized that, it wasn't about I need to be the artist. It was I need to be the story person. I've got to get my foot in there. And then to find that in comics, something that I deeply loved and have been, such a huge collector of, and like just obsessive about for so long, and to be able to work on these properties, that has been fulfilling in a way that if you would have told me in college, I would have been amazed, but also utterly baffled. Like, how did you get from there to here?
Right.
And yet incrementally, when you see those steps and all the different opportunities, you go, oh, that kind of makes sense,
Yeah. Yeah. It all kind of
its
locks
own
into
sort
place.
of way. Yeah.
It's
Man.
we talked a lot about writing and creation and storytelling, and I know that like a lot of people, like your students and your viewers and our viewers as well, are looking for like these avenues, these shortcuts, or at the very least these trappings that are like, how do I write, how do I express myself, how do I get in the industry? And ultimately, I think what is the headline of this whole episode is you need to be open to change and growth. Like,
and it sounds corny, but it's so true. Like, are you the kind of person that other people want to work with? Are you putting forward, like, if you want to be a writer, that means you better have better story ideas that are more organized than the artist would themselves. Because if not, why are they working with you? Do you know what I mean?
I do.
What are you bringing to the table? Like, it sounds really, and that's not to be mean, but it's like, you better have a better idea. You better have better dialogue. You better be more organized, because those are the qualities that you are bringing to this creative team. Do you know what I mean? Those are the aspects that you need to have in order for people to look and say, you are the writer, and the same thing with the art. If you're going to produce at a professional level, what are you presenting forth? And how far do you want to take it? And what are you showcasing? I've literally had people show me their portfolio, and they showed me pages, and I thought these pages looked really bad. And I sort of started to critique them, and they go, oh, I know that. Yeah, I know that wasn't. And I started looking at them and go, why are you showing me these? Oh, because they're published. They're professional work. And I go, are you proud of them?
Right.
Like, do you think this exemplifies your skills? And they're like, well, no, I know I could do better, but I was told I have to show professional work. And it's like, but not if it isn't the best you can do. Do you know what I mean? And so people get it in their head, like, you gave me a piece of advice, I followed it, why did I not get the result?
Exactly.
Like, no, analysis is still part of the whole thing, right?
Right. You can't. There is no book, and it could, because all of the stuff, like all the inner workings, the algorithm of it can be gamed, it can be circumvented, but you need to be like, you need to have a diverse set of skill sets and experiences, and you need to have this realistic expectation of what your quality
and it's also
is.
You're curating what you present, right? Like, so at first it's understandable when you're just trying to build up experience and credits, you just take anything, right? I got to pay the bills, the classic, I got to pay the bills, right? But that doesn't mean you have to put all of those on your resume. Like,
we don't put like my high school job on my resume as an adult.
Oh, you mean you cut lawns? You're perfect for this executive
You were a
position.
lifeguard? Cool.
Yeah.
Like
that's fine. Obviously, we all have those jobs.
It shows work experience, but it's not relevant to the topic.
Even within your industry, like, so I have some students that, their first job they got out of school was working on like preschool animation. It's real simple stuff. They got paid, it was a good job, and they're like, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. And they organize a new portfolio that is oriented towards what they want to do. And they don't put the preschooler stuff on their reel, or they put very little of it.
Right.
Only the absolute best shots, or whatever you want to say. And they tilt your expectation. It's like, later on, if you're in conversation, you can say, yeah, I did that for 5 years. And they're like, whoa, you did a lot of preschool stuff or whatever. But that's not the point. Like, my first gig at Marvel were what is dismissively called candy comics, right? So they're the giveaway stuff in a package of cereal, or they're like advertising comics or whatever. Like, that some candy companies signed a deal with Marvel, and they're going to do a digital code that you can read their little promotional whatever, right?
Yeah.
They do tons of these. There were huge licensing division, all dedicated to this stuff. And it was a really good way for me to get paid and to prove I could deliver on spec. And, you know, every so often insert something a little fun, but your job is to basically make an entertaining advertisement, right? It is not going to be deep and meaningful, you know, soul shearing kind of work. Like that's not what you're there for. And yet the editors who run that division, they're not going to be there for the rest of their days. They're going to move on to other positions in the company, and they're going to remember you delivered. You were so easy to work with. The client loved you. They know exactly, you know, that you can deliver.
Right.
And it's like, yes, you could get typecast, but there's also something to be said for, hey, I did a good job, you know, and I'm good at this, and I'm now on the payroll or whatever you want to call it. It's easy to migrate me to these other projects. Or now you know me and we communicate. It's that much easier for me to say, hey, you know, I really want to move on to these kinds of things. And they go, I'm going to keep an eye out because I know you work hard and you are good and you can deliver. Or, you know, oh, really? You want to do something like that? Send me something that I can show to the powers that be, you know what I mean? And then I can tell them you're reliable, you're capable, all that other stuff, you know?
Totally.
And that's sort of thing where people, I think they don't want to lower themselves to that, or they think they're too good for it or whatever. And it's like, you know, do you know Dan Slott's first comic at Marvel?
Was that the Ren and Stimpy Spider-Man book?
Ren and Stimpy. Yeah. He did a Ren and Stimpy comic, right? He did a lot. He did Looney Tunes. He did all kinds of different cartoon tie-in books for years, right? And it's not like they said later on, well, you can't do superheroes because you wrote
because you did
this.
this. No.
Everyone kind of gets like, no, you're going to do different stuff. You know, that's just how that's going to go.
Exactly.
You know? Yeah. And that's cool. Like, you know, I've got a bunch of TV animation work that I did that was all very little kid stuff. And I did background design. I was doing 30 backgrounds a week for a couple of different television shows. You just crank that stuff out. And it's like, that's not going up on my wall in a frame. Like, you're like, okay, we did the thing. You know?
You know, if you did a background for Batman the Animated Series, I might put that on the wall. But,
I did not. This was not
I'm just saying, you know, you know, but I see what you're saying. You know, you got to do, you know, you got to pay your dues, kind of.
Or just understand that whatever you're working on now is not, if you love doing it, obviously it's amazing, but it's also not, you know, Dane, that is all you will ever be or all you will ever do, or, you know, all those kinds of things.
Well, and also don't be afraid to like push and ask for more or for greater, you know, like because you mentioned, you know, that aspect of like, oh, and don't be afraid to say, I want to do something else. Like, you have to be in that mindset, and you have to be like that kind of person who would say, hey,
but it's also about being realistic and honest, right? It's that weird balancing point of like, hey, I wrote Spider-Man in a giveaway comic. Clearly you guys are giving me Amazing Spider-Man next
I'm gonna take over.
I'm good to go, you know.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that simple, but on the other hand, you're like, it's still incremental. You're still, you know, putting yourself out there and getting those things, you know, going, right? And that's all part and parcel of it. It's not a steady climb. It's not easy. It's bumpy. It's weird. We all have these moments of just like, oh man, I thought I had a clear shot to this goal, but it's always going to be fraught with, you know, different challenges and stuff. And also, I think I try and tell a lot of people, I know you may have a dream project, dream character. The ones you can control are the projects you're creating, right? Your creator-owned stuff, your own independent projects. If your entire life is hanging on doing Spider-Man, you may never get a chance to write Spider-Man. Like, you have to. That doesn't mean you shouldn't shoot for it. That doesn't mean you can't be passionate about it. It doesn't mean you don't, whatever, you got the tattoo, you're going to do the thing. This means a lot to you. I get it. And again, I almost want to say like that this isn't a manga where the inevitability of your dreams will come true because
because you concentrate hard enough.
Right. If I try hard enough, you know, whatever, all the things. Like, it is, oh God, I'm not even a Star Trek guy. And there's that Picard line of like, you can do everything right and still
lose.
And still lose. You can not have made any mistakes.
That's it.
And still not win, or whatever that is. That quote that someone will throw in the comments and be like, way to ruin it, Zub. You can do great work and not get the dream book. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can ask the universe and not receive the thing. And that's okay. Like, putting yourself out there and making stuff is always going to be a weird, process. And it's going to have, your mileage may vary, right?
Yeah.
That is the whole thing of it. But, I say to students, like, people say the right place at the right time. And the only way to have the right one is to make places and times, right?
That's a good point.
So you
Yeah.
put yourself out there, you put things out into the universe, you go to conventions or you interact with people, you put the best version of yourself into those spaces, and then something somewhere tilts. And at the time, when it finally happens, you can look and go, isn't that an amazing coincidence? And it's like, no, you did this 100 times.
Right.
And it's great that the dice rolled your way that time, but it's like, you've been putting in the work. It seems magical when it finally happens, when someone thinks of you and calls you and offers you amazing thing. I can't tell you, like walking on air, when Mark Basso calls me and says, you're our number one pick for Conan. Like, we want you to take over the book. And it's like, oh my God, like when I was a kid, I read this book and the novels and the comics and means so much to me.
Yeah.
Now I got to live up to all that expectation. Right.
Right.
But if it didn't happen, that's still, I've still done all those other things.
Exactly.
And I'm, on the other side of Conan, I can't just say, well, that was the peak.
I did it. I'll jump in my grave.
Like, like, ta-da. Yeah, get the dirt over me. I'm finished. Like, there's nothing left. You've got to be, last year, I was simultaneously writing Conan the Barbarian and Dungeons and Dragons. Right.
Yeah.
And it's like two of the biggest properties in fantasy. I'm a sword and sorcery goober. It probably doesn't get it any better than this in terms of visibility on those in that genre.
Yeah.
But I've got other things I want to do. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to do, the good news is whatever fantasy project I do next, now I get to attach the words Dungeons and Dragons and Conan to my name.
Sure.
What does the guy that did Dungeons and Dragons and Conan do unfettered on his own fantasy, whatever? Like, what's next? That's cool. Like, that's a nice thing to be able to do. Or, also understanding that at every stage, you're also building up your ability to, and it's like the word brand, leverage. When I say leverage your ideas or leverage your what you're known for, or any of those types of things, and that changes in such incredible ways too. And sort of being cognizant of it and being like, oh, I could contact an editor who 10 years ago wouldn't have given me the time of day. And maybe they'll say they don't have anything, but they'll respond.
Yes.
They'll definitely talk to me, or let's get on a call, or, oh, cool. Okay, that's kind of neat.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all part of that evolution, I think, as well. And so when you're looking at, you were talking about pieces of advice. I know I'm jumping all over the place.
No,
this is probably also a good note to end on, frankly.
Yeah.
I have a really good friend in the comic book business who for a long time was very bitter and angry and frustrated, because in their head, they deserved and wanted to be on a higher level, and they weren't getting that.
Mm-hmm.
And at some points, they were doing really amazing projects, and
they weren't appreciating it.
Never seemed to appreciate it. And they said afterwards, when I got Thunderbolts, they actually called me up and they said, enjoy the ride. And I was like, of course. And they go, no, you don't get it, man. And I was like, okay, like, tell it to me. And they go, when I was doing stuff on that level, I never appreciated it. I was looking like, who can I pull down, or who can I get to the next climb up and tear through? And, I'm the man, I'm going to do this thing.
Yeah.
And I never looked and said, isn't this cool?
Right.
Isn't this fun? Holy crap. Can you imagine whatever 8-year-old, 10-year-old, 12-year-old you doing the thing right now? I was so frustrated that I wasn't at the top, that I couldn't even appreciate that I was playing in the major league, or whatever you want to, analogy we want to use.
Absolutely.
For this, right.
Yeah.
And he goes, I wish I had, because now I don't know that I'll ever get to do that stuff again. And I've got a reputation for being a very sarcastic, snarky person about the work. And I was like, oh, and he goes, enjoy it, like really enjoy it.
Yeah.
And so in the moments when you're stressed and you're frustrated and you're like, man, these deadlines are, why can't I get them to understand this thing to get it approved or all this other stuff? You know, I keep that in mind. And then my wife will every so often say to me, she goes, yeah, but it's still comics. And I'm like, but it's still comics. Like, you know, on my worst day, on my most frustrated, it is a job. And that means it's difficult and stressful and all those things. And in some cases, it can be more because you put your heart into it and you don't want to screw it up. If I was just doing a whatever Joe job at a, you know, whatever, fill in the blank, you could walk home and just dust your hands off and go, well, I'm done for the day. But it's never done. You're always thinking,
you're always there. Yeah.
But I try so hard to appreciate, like, and I try, you know, something as simple as the conventions that I took for granted, you know, we're not traveling right now. Like, you know, and at the time I was doing 12 to 15 conventions a year and literally popping all around, in some cases, the world.
Yeah.
And I never got cocky about it. I always like, wow, this is really cool. Yeah. But now, like, the next time I go on a trip, it's going to be like, whoa.
Yeah.
Remember this? That is cool. That is fun. And it sort of resets my brain on that stuff. And that's one of the reasons I also love teaching, is because if I did have any of that cynicism or that frustration or that like, oh man, this sucks. If I'm in casual conversation with the students and they're like, oh, what are you working on? Like, oh, you know, I've got a new D&D project. And they're like, what? Dungeons and Dragons. And you're just like, yeah. Like, and I love this stuff.
Yeah.
But their enthusiasm reminds me of my enthusiasm, reconnects me and re-energizes me and goes, this is awesome. You know, like, and so wherever you're at, if you're making your very first story, if you're getting your very first thing published, if you're on your 10th, 12th, 15th, 300th script, you know, whatever you're doing, try to just sort of get that little moment, step back and go, hey, this is cool.
Yeah.
Hey, look at this. I've never done this before, or I've never taken it this far. I have a little ritual that I do with my wife when they send the comp copies of comics. You know, I get the package, whatever, and I crack it open. I always pull out the top one and I hold it and I joke. She thinks it's really stupid. Funny, but I hold it up and I go, I made a comic. And she goes, you should keep doing that. And I go, I will.
I will.
And it's like, we've done this hundreds of times, right?
Yeah.
But it's like a fun little ritual. Like the package comes and I crack it open and I pull it out and I go, I made a comic. Yeah. And like, if I can't do that, if I throw those in a corner or something, I got to reevaluate.
Totally.
Like why am I doing this? Why did I go here? You know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, this was awesome. Jim, thanks so much for coming on the show, man, and lending us your experience and advice. It's always invaluable, and it's always a pleasure just hanging out and chatting. What is something that you're working on that people can go check out?
Sure.
Next.
Or now. Yeah, Conan 300 came out.
Yes, recently. Congratulations, by the way.
A lot of fun. I've always wanted to do one of those big anniversary issues.
Yes.
And I am super excited to, when I get back to conventions, to sign up a storm of those. I'm really, really proud of the issue. I'm really proud of the whole run. Really happy with what we did. Yeah. I've got a new Dungeons and Dragons miniseries coming out called Mindbreaker that's currently in pre-order, coming out this fall. Avengers Tech On is continuing at Marvel. Yes. Trying to think about other things I'm allowed to talk about.
Gotcha.
I've got World of Darkness Crimson Thaw that I'm co-writing for Vault on the World of Darkness stuff, all their Vampire the Masquerade and things like that.
Yeah.
And I think the first issue of that's coming out in a few weeks as well. So on the comic front, that's what I've got going on that I can talk about, and other cool things that are that are bubbling in the cauldron or whatever, you know.
Excellent.
That I'm really pumped for. Yeah.
That's exciting, man. Well, thank you all so much for hanging out with us, and we'll see you guys next time with another episode. But make sure, by the way, to follow Jim on all of his various socials and his own YouTube channel, which you can find in the description below this video and every video here on ComicPop Returns. So long, everybody.